Welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast, the podcast dedicated to simplifying the commercial real estate industry for the masses. Each week, we sit down with industry experts to dissect the many facets of commercial real estate and extract valuable lessons you can apply to your business. Whether you're a new or seasoned business owner or investor, the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast will be your go-to resource for all your commercial real estate needs. Now, here are your hosts, Raphael Collazo and Jeff Walston.
Welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast. I'm your host, Raphael Collazo, here with my co-host, Jeff Walston. How's it going, man?
It's going great. Hello, everyone. How are you doing today, Raphael?
Can't complain. It's been pretty productive today. Just trying to get some things squared away before the weekend. Just excited to be here with you and to all of you guys listening as well. Really, in today's episode, we wanted to introduce is JC Cicero. I met him through Chad Griffiths. In fact, Chad interviewed him on his YouTube channel, and I reached out to him because he provided such great insights on his channel that I thought it'd be great for him to come onto our channel. So JC is actually a commercial real estate attorney in New York City who has a wealth of knowledge in the commercial real estate arena and really condominiums and high rises, et cetera. He actually got in the commercial real estate business because he's a native New Yorker, and throughout his early childhood and growing up, he saw these massive skyscrapers coming up in different areas, and he wanted to get involved with the movers and shakers within New York City. And he thought one of the best ways to do that was to get into real estate law. So really provided a lot of great insights into this in this podcast episode, primarily related to what to focus on when you're going through the transaction, in particular on the legal side. He's helped a ton of clients navigate the perils of purchasing commercial real estate and even residential real estate we touched on, which is how he actually got into the investing game. But just analyze different things you have to look out for, some of the pitfalls that you could experience from a legal standpoint as you navigate the process of purchasing a property. He also talked a lot about how his legal background has helped him in his investing career. And then we also dove into the concept of building a brand. So he actually runs a YouTube channel called Confident Real Estate Investing, where he talks about different commercial real estate and real estate concepts that are helpful to individuals, essentially. So he's been able to leverage that platform to establish himself as a authority figure in this industry, and it served him very well. So we touched on how he was able to do that and some of the strategies that he used in order to really grow the channel. So I thought it was very insightful. Jeff, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was very enlightening to one of his concepts that he has about real estate is the ripple effect, and I can't wait for you guys to hear how he wraps his mind around for anyone that's listening and wants to invest in commercial real estate or just real estate in general, of how he and his concept of the ripple effect. So can't wait for you guys to hear it.
Yeah, how to identify property surrounding large areas of development. So yeah, I 100% agree with you. And I think that you guys will gain a ton of value from this podcast episode. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in. Hey, JC, thanks for stopping by the podcast. We really do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Yeah. So when we first start these interviews, what we like to do is learn a little bit more about the person that's across the table from us. So can you kind of explain who you are, what your background is, and really what got you into commercial real estate?
Sure. I am a commercial real estate attorney in Manhattan, a real estate investor as well in the New York City tri-state area. I grew up in New York City. I'm one of those rare native New Yorkers, born and raised. And it's hard to not get somewhat involved in real estate when you see neighborhoods constantly evolving and changing around you. For example, where I grew up, when I grew up with a single parent, and when my mother moved us to the neighborhood we were in, it was a on the verge neighborhood. There was still some shady areas a couple blocks away that you didn't want your kids to wander down to, and there were warehouses. And by the time I was back from college, the neighborhood was filled with chain retailers like Bed Bath & Beyond and restaurants and Those warehouses were now 50-story luxury condominium developments. Everything changed. And you realize how gentrification works, people who get priced out, the value of capital appreciation for people like my mother who had bought an apartment, 20 years earlier for nothing compared to what it was worth by the time she sold it, how market cycles work, that she luckily sold at the right time just before 9/11. So you really get a sense of living in New York City, how real estate evolves the city and how it works. And I wanted to get involved in it as well and understand it. And I was honestly fascinated because I would see these major luxury buildings and skyscrapers going up. And I thought, there is actually someone out there who lives in the same city as me, who is calling the shots on everything that happens with that building. Who is that guy? How did they get there? And what did they have to go through to get to that point? And that kind of set me on my path to learning how real estate worked. And thankfully, I had somebody who was an executive recruiter that I knew. And they told me either go and get a MBA from a top 10, top 20 program, or get a law degree. And those are probably your best bets for getting into big investment scale real estate. And that's what I went and did. I went and got a law degree, and from day one was focused on real estate law. And now I've been practicing as an attorney for over 10 years at this point, but I've been involved in real estate for about 15. And now I invest in real estate and everything. As you know, real estate is a lifestyle. You eat, sleep, breathe, and live real estate 24/7, 365.
Oh, for sure. And it's interesting you say about New York City, because it's one of those cities that really it never sleeps, right? It's always evolving. It's always changing. And the fact that you have that experience of seeing the neighborhood change so drastically, I'll say, I mean, obviously we're in Louisville, Kentucky right now, and the pace is completely different. I mean, and I used to live in DC, so I understand a lot of the East Coast type of pace, but it's quite interesting to hear you say that. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a bubble unto itself, New York City. It's not like the rest of the country. And, obviously that's why a lot of people want to come to New York City. I recall being a single guy in my own apartment. If I couldn't sleep at 2 a.m, I'd walk to the end of the block, have a drink, shoot some pool, and then go back to bed, because at 2 a.m, it was still a hopping place full of people.
For you in the city, you're walking down and you see the guys that are building these buildings, and you're thinking, who are these guys? How'd they get there? So instead of going the developer way on these buildings and such, what made you become a real estate attorney? And then why did you focus just on commercial real estate?
Good question. I actually, growing up, most of my friends and family members, I'm the first male in my family to actually go to college. So a lot of my friends looked at these construction sites and said, oh, I want to get a union job, or, I know somebody, my uncle could get me in the union and I want to do this. And I don't know, maybe I just didn't want to continue on that path, because my friends' fathers and uncles and cousins, and even my own uncles and cousins, they were all, hardworking blue collar guys who would work construction jobs. They were the same people that were getting priced out of the neighborhoods that they were working to gentrify and build up. They were thankful for the paycheck, but it was also pushing them out of the neighborhoods that they lived in. And I just saw it as a cycle that was never going to work out. I mean, everybody I knew growing up, my family, my friends' families, they were always living paycheck to paycheck. And for me, with a single mother who worked multiple jobs to support myself and my younger sister, I just was like, I can't repeat the cycle. I have to do something different. And thankfully, when I actually tried, school was pretty easy for me. It was just a matter of actually trying. So I finally got to the point in high school where I was ready to take it seriously and, do something different. I didn't know what it was going to be, but I had to break the cycle. And I didn't know if I was going to be a broker or something else. But I also, I'm trying to think of a good way to phrase it. I grew up around a lot of guys who, if you had a problem with somebody, or there was a situation that needed to be taken care of, somebody knew somebody they could call to straighten the situation out. Yeah. And in the business world, that doesn't work. But who do people call? They call lawyers. And for me, it seemed like, not that I'm confrontational, but I like a good fight. I like to have a intellectual battle with people. And I really need the intellectual stimulation of dissecting complex things and having complex thought processes. I get bored easily. And I knew this, being a lawyer, I wouldn't get bored. So it was kind of, kill two birds with one stone. I thought being a lawyer would be a good fit for me. And also because I wanted to be in real estate, I could do that and be a lawyer, and it would all work out.
Oh, for sure. And I'll even echo that. I mean, I know a lot of people who are in the commercial business, whether they're brokers or whatever else, that have law backgrounds for that exact reason. They're very, you're in the midst of a transaction from almost start to finish. So I think it's a smart idea. One of the best ways to do it are either going the brokerage route or the law route, because again, you get right into the transaction and get from start to finish. So that's great. So yeah. We know that you got into the law side, and now you're, from the beginning, you've always kind of wanted to get into the commercial real estate investing side. So can you tell us a little bit about maybe your first real estate deal, whether that was residential or commercial, or if you have a commercial deal under your belt, if you can elaborate on that, I think that'd be awesome.
Yeah. I mean, my first, you come out of law school and you take the bar exam and you pass and you feel on top of the world, and then you get a job at a law firm. And they hand you a file and tell you, I need you to prepare a deed, closing statements, do the adjustments, negotiate the contract, and they walk away. And then you realize you really don't know anything. And you are completely at square one, and everything they just said to you went in one ear and out the other, because they're using terms that weren't the terms you heard in law school or read out of a textbook. So the firm I worked at, that I still work at, they do a lot of, they're primarily a real estate firm. We're like 20, 21 attorneys, but we do everything from commercial leasing, tax abatements, tax lots, new construction, condominium development, which is huge in New York City, commercial real estate, residential, et cetera. So I started in the residential group just to understand how closings work, because, a developer will build a building and have 120 units, and the condo conversion department and those real estate attorneys, which I'm now a part of, it's about 40-50% of what I do is new construction condominium developments. And those buildings will have 100, 120 units, whatever, 200 units. And we would represent, our firm's residential department would represent the developer in closing, negotiating the contracts and closing all 120 or whatever, however many units there were in each of these buildings. And there'd be like 3-4 buildings going on at a time. So it was really dropped right into the fire, and doing like 2-3 closings a day with a senior associate when I was a junior associate, who would just guide me. And, repetition is great practice. And after like 3 days, they were like, all right, I think you're good. You do some. And okay. And you kind of figure it out, and you realize that and this is where growing up in the city and being around, how do I phrase this? People with a street background really comes in handy, because you can read people and you realize the attorneys on the other side of the table who are trying to take advantage of you and push you around. You see it for what it is. Having thick skin, I was able to say, hold on a second, I'll be right back, and go check with the senior attorney, because I could realize they were trying to pull the wool over my eyes on a deal here or there, or get credits at the closing table that they weren't entitled to, make up things that were material issues on a punch list that really weren't. And after about a year or so of that, pretty seasoned, I was teaching new junior attorneys how to do it. But I realized that I wanted to do commercial real estate. And I had also, during law school, I'd gotten an internship at the New York State Attorney General's office when Cuomo was the state attorney general, and the governor, who's now under some heat. And I worked in the Real Estate Finance Bureau, approving new condo developments as a full-time paralegal while going to law school full-time. So for me, I already had that background, and that was part of why the firm hired me. So I started segueing into the new condo development. And then I've always had the dream of doing commercial real estate deals, being what we call a dirt attorney, doing the deal from the time there's a term sheet all the way through structuring the corporate agreements between the parties that are investing, negotiating loan documents, closing the deal. And, fast forward 10 years later, I don't really do residential deals at all. I do all commercial deals, commercial finance, structured finance deals, 1031, tax deferred deals, reverse 1031s. And that's about 50-60% of what I do every day. And then the other 40-50% is new construction condominiums. I think I'm the only attorney at our firm that straddles both practice groups. Everyone else is either all commercial real estate or all in the condominium department. But I wanted to do both. I wanted to diversify. Again, I knew I'd get bored doing just one thing. So that's where I am. And at this point, I've probably done a couple of hundred commercial deals. You asked for an example of a deal I just did. I just did a deal for a client where they sold a investment property. It was a mixed use. It was office and retail in Westchester, New York, just outside New York City. We did a 1031 exchange where they took their proceeds. We put them in an account with a qualified intermediary, so the client never touched it. We went and bought an apartment complex for $19 million. We took the money from the 1031 to contribute into the deal for the purchase of the new apartment complex. But at the same time, they had another investment property in Long Island that they were going to sell. And they wanted to use the proceeds from that and do another 1031 exchange to also put those proceeds towards the purchase of this apartment complex. But it wasn't going to close in time. So that became what we call a reverse 1031 exchange. So it was a tenancy in common agreement between two entities. One was doing a 1031 delayed exchange. One was doing a reverse 1031 exchange, both so they could defer capital gains taxes. And to add on top of that, they were also refinancing another apartment complex that they owned for $32.5 million. And they needed that to close before the purchase of the new property because they were going to cash out on the refinance. They were cashing out about $3 million that they needed to put towards their equity piece in the purchase of the new property. So it ended up becoming this 2 weeks of full immersion, getting everything done. And we closed the refinance on a Monday and the purchase on a Wednesday.
Nice.
And it all got done. But
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's crazy deals. But I mean, those are the things that you stress you out while you're in it, but you live for it. And when it's done, you're like, wow, I actually just did that. I accomplished it. Somehow we got it done. Yeah.
And a lot of people just don't see the difficulties that occur during that transaction or during that process and the work that goes into it. And obviously with reverse exchanges, I mean, if you could have the capital ready to go to be able to purchase the property and then perform the exchange on the back end, that obviously is quite beneficial. So that's awesome, man. So
yeah, I've had clients who say, oh, I don't have, I'm coming to the table short. I need to know exactly what the closing adjustments are going to be because I might be short. But thankfully, this was a client who was like, yeah, I'll just wire an extra $500,000. They'll send it back to me after the closing. Like, okay.
Nice. So with all the experience that you gained through your, through the legal side, how do you think that's helped you with the investing side of things for you?
It helps me, experience is the best teacher. No matter what you do, it's always going to be harder the first time you do it than the 100th time you do it.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm actually in the process of buying a multifamily house for my own portfolio I live in Jersey City, right across the Hudson River from Manhattan. If I walk out the front steps of my townhome, I'm looking at Brooklyn and Lower Manhattan. And on this side of the river, New York City is expensive. And the waterfront district in New Jersey, Hoboken, Jersey City, Bayonne, has been heating up over the last 5-10 years. And it's gotten crazy, which is why I bought about 8 years ago because I saw it coming. I was like, we got to buy now if we're going to stay here. And thankfully we did. And, we've enjoyed tremendous equity appreciation on our own home. But following the ripple effect, I do a lot of work for a major developer, a publicly traded company who's a client of our firm. And I won't name names, but one of the top executives there told me when he does a new development here in the city, he says, I look at the area that's booming, that everybody wants to be in, and I take the train 2 stops further, and that's where I buy. Because by the time I'm done building, they will have caught up to us. And that's kind of the mentality I used for my own perspective here in my own portfolio. So I went to, not to ramble on, but I went to go buy a property in an area that's starting to become hot, that I looked at the Department of Buildings. Because I'm a lawyer, I knew where to look. I knew what I was looking for. I looked at all the permits that had been filed, who was filing them. They were, all under entities, but I could go to the Secretary of State website and look up who owned those entities. I was like, oh, these are major players involved. They're going to be building mega buildings in this area. Let me buy up and around the transportation where the train system is and the bus system in that area, because again, for me, investing, I don't like luxury product. I like Class B, Class C product, because as the luxury element moves in, people will get priced out and I will have the affordable option. It's almost recession resistant, because if the market takes a downturn, when the market takes its downturn and cyclical nature, anybody who can't afford the Class A development because it was a stretch to begin with, I'm ready and waiting for them with my Class B property, So the difference is when you're in these areas and you go to buy a Class B property from a homeowner, it's a multifamily property, few units, they hire a local attorney who doesn't specialize in real estate. They're jack of all trades, master of none. And for instance, this property I'm buying right now, we did the title search. I was buying from a husband and wife. Title search comes back. The title and mortgage are in the name of 3 people. Not just the husband and wife. There's a third person. And the other side said, oh yeah, I'm sure it's a relative. I need to really be sure. And, they would send me an amendment that was just to the contract. And I was like, that's not legally sufficient. Like, I know what I need and what you provided is not adequate, but that's the difference being a commercial real estate attorney in New York City, dealing with private equity funds, publicly traded companies, family offices worth hundreds of millions and more, versus doing my own deal. And on the other side of the table from me is not another major law firm, but a local attorney who really practices personal injury and does some real estate closings on the side. And when you have some hairiness in the deal, having the experience and being a real estate attorney is obviously an immeasurable help to getting the deal done and covering my own rear end and protecting myself and my investment, versus just having a local attorney who's like, it looks good to me. Sure.
Oh, definitely. Sure. From a protection standpoint, that makes complete sense. And I really like the strategy that you provided, which was looking at permitting that it's occurring in different areas. Like you said, there's a path of progress, and it happens on every single city. There's always going to be an area where everyone's just dying to get to. But if you just look down the street a few blocks, or maybe in a smaller city, you go a few miles in a direction where the progress is occurring, pulling some of those permits and getting an understanding of what the activity is going to look like over the next 6 to 12 months could be extremely beneficial if you're interested in buying in that area. So that's awesome. I think that's a phenomenal strategy. I like to refer to it as ripple effect real estate investing, because the center of where it's hot is where the stone is dropped in the water, and then the rings going outward from that center point. It depends on which ring you want to invest in. The further out you go, the cheaper you're going to buy the property, the more equity appreciation you'll have in the long term. But can you support the carrying costs if you're not going to get the rents that you need on day one? And having the ability to go look at those permits and see who else is active in the area will really give you an idea of how far or how close you need to be to where the action currently is, and versus your own financial situation to be able to support it. It's a little bit like option trading. Yeah. But it's also something that the vast majority of people don't do. So if you even do a little bit of research on the front end, it could pay huge dividends on the back end. So that's awesome, man. So let's walk through a scenario where, you're looking to get a property under contract. So in your case, what are some of the common things that you need to consider, or some of the common pitfalls that occur during contract negotiations that investors should look out for?
A scary thing that's happening lately is, real estate's been very strange the last 12, 18 months. Markets that were never hot are booming in suburban and rural areas. Cities like New York City died last year, and now it's booming. I mean, contracts, buildings can't keep they're not selling at the top dollar they wanted 2 years ago, but they're selling. And it's interesting because the markets are so hot. I even on my own deal that I'm doing now, the broker said, oh, they want a contingency waiver. They want you to waive your contingency and inspection waiver. They want you to waive your rights to a financing contingency and inspections because that'll get you ahead of everyone else bidding on the property. And again, having experience, I was at the open houses in the area I was looking at. Most of the people who were buying were planning to live at the property. There were some investors, but most of the people were looking to like house hack, buy, live in one unit, rent out the others to help with the mortgage and build some equity value. I knew they weren't putting down 25% cash, at minimum. They were going to probably apply for possibly FHA loans and put 3.5%, 5% down. So I put my foot in the ground and said, I'm not waiving the inspections or the mortgage financing contingency. And it's going to be contingent upon a final commitment, not just a preliminary commitment approval. It's got to be a final commitment that's not contingent on a survey or something else coming back. And they said, well, you're not the top dollar offer. I said, yeah, but I'm pretty sure I'm the only one putting 25% down. And they took my offer and I went and did the inspection, and things came up during the inspection, and the sellers were hesitant to give me credits for some of the things I wanted. And it's interesting because the offer they accepted, they had a brand new washer and dryer that were top of the line in the bigger unit. It was a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom unit. Whoever's renting that needs a washer and dryer. They're going to have a family. So I said, I want that included in the offer. You're leaving it behind because in this area, people tend to take those things with them. They said, okay. After we signed the contract, their attorney came back and said, edits to the contract, they're not giving you the washer and dryer. I said, that was part of my initial offer. You agreed to it already. So long story short, having the ability to do the inspection, find issues that I knew I could resolve because I've experienced them before in other properties, and they weren't big headaches, but they were costly. Long story short, I know I can get them done reasonably. They don't have to be all done on day one. Now I have the washer and dryer again because that was something the sellers were willing to give me rather than go through the credit process. So I think it is always important to do your due diligence. Know what you're buying, do the inspections. I mean, a lot of people just seem, especially when they're newer in investing, or, it's like when you go to buy a house and people say, wow, it's beautiful. I love the fixtures. Like when I bought my own house, my wife said, oh, it's gorgeous. I could see us living here. I was like, yeah, it looks nice. Let me look at the mechanicals. When was piping redone? How dated is the electrical? I don't care what it looks like. I could fix that. I need to know what I can't see, what's behind the walls. And those are the big dollar items that will cost you a pretty penny. Anything cosmetic, don't worry about it. You can do that. You don't have to do it all on day one. It's the stuff behind the wall that you may need to take care of it on day one, and the stuff above you on the roof that you may need to take care of on day one.
Yeah, for sure. So really the contingencies are huge. And I agree with you 100%, especially in today's hot market. A lot of people are trying to waive those, or they're requesting to waive those, but it may not be worth it for you to waive, especially if the building's an older property. Maybe there's been some renovations, interior renovations. You just don't know what's behind those walls. You don't really understand what if there's any issues with mechanicals. So I 100% agree with that. And also include timelines, because that's something that people like to say, oh, well, I want you to shorten your inspection contingency or your financing contingency from, let's say, 45 days to, 30 days, or sometimes even more compressed than that. But understanding that, it's a hot market, there's a lot of activity. Inspectors and trades professionals are very busy right now. So getting them lined up to be able to get into the property in and of itself can be a challenge. And with a lot of issues as far as financing are concerned, they're just having a lot of activity. It's always good to give yourself a little bit of time in between those types of scenarios in order to make sure that you're able to get through the timeline. So
agree. As you know, you gotta hit the ground running. You can't delay. When you get an offer accepted, it's like the full team needs to attack immediately. And the only other thing I would add is get a real estate attorney, because you want to make sure your contract protects you in case the current owners did unpermitted work that you're later going to pay a penalty for. You want to make sure there's no underground storage tanks. You want to go to, the local town or make the seller provide you the certificate that shows it was properly removed. Things like that. If you don't have it in your contract and you're not obligating the seller to provide the permit proof or the, environmental cleanup proof for the storage tank, that can come back and bite you.
Oh yeah, for sure. So on the commercial side, what do you think on the due diligence process that some are the common mistakes or things that people overlooked, or like the pitfalls of that on the due diligence process for commercial, just investors in general that you have?
Things they overlook, definitely the seriousness of the inspection, a survey. One of these things that bothers me on YouTube that I see is I've seen videos where people say you don't really need a title policy. Title insurance is not for everybody. That blows my mind. Especially like you look at the situation I'm in where there's a third seller that was not in the contract initially. The husband and wife never thought to mention, oh yeah, my wife's mother's also on this with us. I need her approval to sell the property. I actually put in the contract in my rider that the seller parties represent that they are the only people, sole owners of the property with full authority to convey title to the property and, no other issues. And then, I did a title report and it came back that there's a third party out there. You need that title insurance because had we not figured that out, maybe that third party, passed away and yet they had to go through probate, or maybe there's somebody else in the family who says, oh, I lent you money when you bought that property and you owe me too. And they come back and they sue. Your title insurance steps in and takes care of that because they insured the title that you got. They'll step in and fight that court battle for you. It's a no-brainer. And people don't put a lot of value, especially people who are new in real estate and don't understand the importance of it. They're so ready to just own the property. You got to make sure your foundation of your portfolio is set, because you could buy 2-3 properties and then have somebody come back with a chain of title defect claim, and that'll take your whole portfolio down. It's expensive to battle. You got to focus on having a good title insurance from one of the major underwriters, not, there's other abstract companies and people that are out there, but you want to make sure your title insurance is from a major underwriter and that you understand the exceptions that in the policy. You don't want certain things to be carved out that will come back to bite you. And do a survey, understand what the property meets and bounds are so that you know what you're actually buying. Because someone may say, look at that beautiful yard, it's gorgeous, and it turns out that really only the first 10 feet of it are on your property, and everything beyond that is on a lot that belongs to the county, and the county is going to come back and take it from you.
Yeah, or a fence line or something's encroaching on someone else's property, and now you have a whole nother issue. So I agree with you on the survey front.
I'll tell you a quick funny story. I had a developer who built a mega project in New York City, and he combined like 6 tax lots to build this big building. And he did the survey and realized that he was like a full corner of this block. And he realized that like 8 properties around the edge of his property that he had compiled were slightly encroaching on his property with their fence lines by a few feet. And we said, oh, we really should file suits and talk to these people, try to come to a settlement, tell them we'll fix the fence. And he goes, you know what? I got construction loans and timing issues. And these people came home and their fences were gone. You just took them all down. And it's like, you're on my lot. I took your fence off my property. And, everybody sued us, but we settled it and worked it out. It was probably more expensive for him than it should have been. But that can happen especially in New York City where it's so densely populated. If you're not aware of what your boundaries are, you're going to be surprised.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we often deal with on the commercial real estate side, I'm a commercial agent right now. So we have some clients who execute what's known as a sale and leaseback. So can you talk a little bit about number one, what a sale and leaseback is, and then maybe why would it be attractive to someone who is looking for that type of investment? So.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually was contemplating one with my dermatologist recently. They're a dermatology practice with like 55 offices in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. And, a sale leaseback is a situation where you have, typically it's a business that occupies a property and they own the property and they occupy it for the use of their business space. That's the most common type of it. And they need to raise cash to expand their business, or, they just don't want to deal with the maintenance headaches and capital repairs of a property. That's not what they're in business for. Like in my example, they're a dermatologist. They don't want to have to deal with those issues, and the doctor has to take away time from his meeting with patients in his practice. So they'll sell you the property as the investor and lease it back from you at a agreed upon lease term and rate, and hopefully get some good guarantees personally from the doctors or whoever the owners of the business are. And basically it becomes either a single net or triple net lease, depending on what your negotiation is. And they're running a successful business already, and they're going to continue to run it and just pay you every month to take care of the property maintenance, perhaps, and just own the property and free up some cash for them. So if it's a great business, it's a win-win. And you have to understand that, if the business does fold or the doctors retire, or, whatever the situation is, what can you do with that property? What is your plan B exit strategy? You always have to have multiple exit strategies and understand what you're investing in. If you're looking to hold it long term, or maybe you're looking to, hold it a little while and flip it to somebody else, you just have to understand what you're getting into. And I think in New York City, the most famous situation of a sale leaseback is Sotheby's Auction House on the Upper East Side of New York. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the story, but they had a really bad situation, I think late 90s, early 2000s, where people who worked for Sotheby's were, I think, indicted and convicted on price fixing for fine art, and like having this negotiation, I think even with Christie's auction house, where they were like setting the market to build bigger prices for art in a scandalous way, and like really setting the market price above what was the fair market, because they were inflating the market. And Sotheby's had such a huge part in it. They were the ringleader of it, the people that worked there at the time, that they almost went bankrupt and disappeared. And now Sotheby's, they've expanded across the world. And one of the major ways they were able to come out of that financial crisis was they sold their building in a sale leaseback scenario. And they have an enormous headquarters on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. They did a sale leaseback with an option to buy it back like 10 years down the road. And I think they eventually did buy it back. I don't even know if they did or if they're still on the lease, but that sale leaseback transaction, which was, like $100-something million, saved them from going bankrupt.
Yeah, for sure. And we have a few that we've dealt with in the past where, like you said, you have like a dermatologist, or you have some sort of, they have one or two locations, but they own the real estate, and they execute a sale and lease back, sign a long-term lease, and they use that capital to start expanding. I know a lot of franchisees that also execute that type of strategy. So that was always something that is interesting to me as far as long-term investments go, especially if the business itself is pretty solvent. Because again, as a business owner, you can probably get a higher return on your money by reinvesting in your business than you could on the real estate side as well. So it could also be attractive to the business owner on that front.
And it's pretty easy tenant.
Oh yeah. So if I was to start a commercial real estate syndication, say, what do you think the things I need to consider legally just some top 2 or 3 to consider before I start that?
Starting a syndication where you're going out to the public to acquire and pool funds for real estate investment, obviously you have to have a track record. You have to have a background. I say that, but yet you always see these fraud cases, and you're like, who would ever have invested with the people at the top? They have no track record. You have to do your due diligence. It's your money. Nobody's going to watch your money like you do. So if you're investing in a syndication, you got to still do the due diligence. Don't get blown away by the fancy presentation or the titles of the people who are running the show. Really do your homework. But if you're starting your own syndication, it's a SEC filing that can be a process, and you really need to cover your rear end and have your T's crossed and your I's dotted, because you don't want the SEC to come calling and find out that you didn't take all the proper steps. and creating a like private equity fund and doing a syndication, whether you're doing a private placement memorandum versus like a larger private equity fund syndication, it can get quite costly from the legal perspective. It's something that I've toyed with the idea of doing someday far in the future. But for right now, I'm happy. Like I said, I enjoy being a lawyer and the intellectual stimulation of it. And I also have young kids and I like seeing them. Yeah. So I don't want to deal with investor calls every night. But yeah, you really got to find somebody who specializes in those kinds of structures from a legal standpoint and an accounting standpoint, and really understand how you have to structure yourself with your LLCs and corporations, the tax ramifications. You're probably going to have to file your entities in Delaware, and then, either file entities in the state where you're investing that are owned by the Delaware entities, or get authority to do the filings. Once you get into like Wall Street, that level, you're getting Wall Street loans, and you're going to have to be subject to what's called REMICs, real estate mortgage and investment conduits, and commercial-backed mortgage-backed securities filings. So your loan documents are going to really dictate as well, like what kind of entities you can have, where they can be filed, the restrictions that you're going to be under. It's not the same as going and investing in a piece of property with some friends and family. It is there's a lot more hoops to jump through. There's a lot more responsibility, obligations on your end, and there's a lot more ramifications if something goes wrong for you personally. So I would never recommend somebody go into the process of trying to form a syndication until they've been doing this for at least, I would say 10 years, because you really got to have a track record and an experience to understand a full market cycle, the ups and downs, and have survived it and learned your lessons before you start playing with other people's money, and really make sure you're doing it right. And you're going to have some serious cash to set the whole thing up properly.
Yeah,
great advice.
And I think there's a common thread in what you're saying, where you get a lawyer involved that has that experience as well. Because again, like you said, there's lawyers that specialize in various different types of law, and obviously getting someone involved that has experience working with those who have done syndications in the past is very helpful. And obviously within syndication and raising money, having to deal with accredited investors, I know the SEC is extremely stringent on how they look at these types of entities. So it's definitely something you really got to do research on and make sure that you understand what you're doing before you start taking people's money. Because again, that's one of the biggest responsibilities, in my opinion, is being the safeguard of other people's money. So,
and in this digital social media age, you're kind of guilty until proven innocent. So if something turns bad and there's an allegation against you and it's printed on the internet, as soon as someone Googles your name, that's going to be the first thing that comes up. And even if unless you can prove that you got an acquittal or, came out of that whole situation clean and the allegations were false, it's going to follow you forever.
Yeah. Definitely. No, I 100% agree with that. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you, and I think this is something that's kind of a common thread amongst a lot of the people that we've interviewed, is the concept of brand building. Because in my opinion, I think that's one of the most important things you can do in any business. It doesn't matter whether you're in real estate. I was in software before. So regardless of what type of industry you're in, building a brand of excellence is crucial. And obviously you've been doing that in your YouTube channel. So can you kind of tell us a little bit about, number one, what's your goal with the YouTube channel? What got you started in it? And how has it helped you thus far to kind of, in both in your business and maybe even in your career?
It's interesting. The YouTube thing, it was started kind of out of boredom, because we were all at the very beginning of the pandemic. We couldn't go anywhere. We were home. Like I said, I have small children, so you need to talk to other people and at least feel like you're still part of the real world. So I started it just because I went on YouTube during the pandemic, really for the first time, to look at what people were talking about with regard to real estate investing. And some of the advice shocked me, and some of the advice was not great and was vague. And I just felt like I could provide something extra with my own experience and background. So I started out in that mindset and that path, covering more complex topics like seller representations and contracts, what you want the seller to be obligated for, things like that. And I realized pretty quickly that is not the YouTube audience. the YouTube audience is really people who are getting started or maybe have one or two deals under their belt. They are not going to be discussing real estate mortgage investment conduits and CMBS loans and, crazy filings in other states and tenancy and common agreements, things like that. So I've kind of not dumbed it down, but I've simplified the topics that I cover, and I enjoy doing it. And I think honestly, having to think up topics for videos and to be able to break them down simply has made me kind of refresh myself on things that I just do automatically every day, and really taking a step back to say, you know what, how does it all work? And kind of refresh my own knowledge base on things that I take for granted because I just do them so often I don't think about them. I enjoy doing it. I enjoy some of the feedback I get. I get some great questions. I enjoy helping other people. I'm an attorney. I enjoy being able to help someone accomplish a deal. I don't think I look at it as, a full branded business. But that's only maybe because I'm so busy with everything else I have on my plate at the moment. But it does keep me busy, and I enjoy it. So for right now, I'm kind of doing it for me more than doing it to build a brand. But brand building, when you're really going out there and trying to build a brand, like, somebody who owns properties or constructs new properties, your reputation and your brand is everything. I mean, I know qualified contractors who build homes and they don't have a brand and they get whatever the market gives them. And I know contractors who do a good job and go out there and they have a brand behind them, and people in local markets say, oh, that home was developed by so-and-so and they're pretty good. And they'll pay a little more because they know the reputation behind it. The guy is an area company and they have a great reputation. They're not going anywhere. If you have an issue, you're not going to have to hunt them down. They're right there out as a brand for everybody to see, and they're in the market actively. They have been for X amount of years. That means something to people, especially when you're buying new construction, whatever, home, condo. You want to know that it's built right. And if there's an issue, that you can find the person who built it to potentially come in and fix something that needs to be fixed.
No, for sure. And I think a big part of it is the trust factor. Because again, if I watch one of your videos and you give me a piece of value, I'm going to have a completely different opinion of you as an individual, even without even having met you. So if I'm looking for a real estate attorney in New York City and I'm doing a quick search on Google or on YouTube, because YouTube is the second largest search engine in the world, and your name pops up, I watch a few of your videos, I'll be like, oh, wow, like JC knows what he's talking about. I'm going to reach out to him. It just builds that connection. It builds that trust. And like you said, with recognition comes a stronger demand for your services. So I feel like you're doing a great job. And I think long-term, regardless of what you want to do, whether you want to continue along with in the legal profession, or if you want to eventually branch off and do full-time investing, I think it's going to pay huge dividends for you. So great job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Fingers crossed.
No, it will. I'm confident, man.
I appreciate it.
So I like asking this question. So a book that you've ever read that it has the most impacted or made you go from thinking one way to maybe another to make you the man you are today. Like what do you think that was?
It's going to be so cliche, but Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah.
I read that book when I was like 20, and it blew my mind because, again, my background growing up in New York City, being around working class neighbors, friends, family, my friends' parents, I just assumed that you had to know somebody or come from a family that was well connected in order to really accomplish anything great in life, that it was too big a leap to get there from the bottom. And reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I thought, you know what, like, you can do it. And it was a reinforcement that I personally needed. And it sent me on my journey for sure. 100%. That book motivated me to take the first steps to pursue something larger. Because again, it mixed with everything I was already thinking about. Like, I can't continue this cycle and always be living paycheck to paycheck like everybody I know. I got to do something different. And that book gave me the inspiration and hope that I actually could do it. And then whatever you think of the man, I read Donald Trump's Think Big and Kick Ass back when, I actually I clerked during law school at a firm, and they did a lot of commercial tenant landlord evictions and negotiations and litigation. And the Trump organization was a big client of theirs. And I remember seeing his signature come across and things I was filing and be like, wow, this is Donald Trump's signature. This is so cool. And never thought like he was going to venture into politics at the time. But that book, whether you like him or not, it's motivating because, especially if you're for me, living in New York City, seeing, he owned these large tracts of land on the far west side that were rail yards that he bought during the 70s when the city was bankrupt for nothing. And he really had to put the deal together in a crazy way. And he ended up building these beautiful buildings that were all different Trump Tower buildings. Now, a lot of those buildings have taken his name off the side of them. But the city enabled him to build these beautiful buildings that overlook New Jersey, right on the water. But he had to rebuild the train stations at 96th Street and 72nd Street, which were these monumental undertakings. But it was like part of the deal. And he, to think at that grand level and say, sure, I'll rebuild 2 major train stations for the city of New York if you're going to let me build 12 skyscrapers on the water in a zoning district that would never permit it. You really have to have some real big ambition to go forward and do that. And that book inspired me too. And then the other one is Powerhouse Principles, and I just went blank on the gentleman's name, but he was a partner in Related Group, Jorge. I don't remember his name, but he started in Miami as I think he was like a surveyor or something for the county. And he would always see these people that were investing in the real estate. It was the same people that he was constantly going out there to look at properties for these same guys. He's like, wow, these guys invest in the real estate. And he ended up becoming a billionaire developer through Related Group. Him and Stephen, what's his name, Roth, who's up in New York. And that was his business partner. And he ran basically the South division of Related. And that book was inspiring because he also started from very humble beginnings and had a dream. And I've learned, I think that is one of the biggest lessons, is determining what your reason why is, that it can't be just because you want to be rich and have flashy things, living below your means, like Rich Dad, Poor Dad teaches, and just having determination, because you really can do anything if you're willing to make the sacrifices of your time to learn what you need to learn, meet the people you need to meet, make the connections you need to make, and just pursue it until it actually happens. I was 20 years old and I thought there's no future for me, but I wish I could get into real estate. And now I just turned 40 and I have been a real estate attorney for over a decade, and I own properties. I mean, it happened. Along the way, I turned around and I was like, oh, wow, I actually did it. But when you're doing it, you don't realize it,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Sure. Yeah. And I'll even say that. I think with one of our previous guests, we talk about having a long-term approach to how you look at your career, because I feel like a lot of people, especially in today's immediate gratification society, people just get caught up in the day-to-day and they don't see immediate progress and then they get disheartened. Whereas in any type of career, any one of those people that wrote those books, they went through a significant amount of adversity. And like you said, whether you like Donald Trump or not, I mean, the guy has done ridiculous things, and it's a lot of it has to do with just beating down the wall until it comes down. And I think it just comes down to vision. It comes down to just continually attacking something over and over and over again until you break through. But yeah, I think that's phenomenal advice. And Rich Dad, Poor Dad's one of those books that I feel like is instrumental for a lot of people as they're looking to get in the real estate career. So that's awesome.
Definitely.
I think we're all programmed to believe the world is set a certain way, and Rich Dad, Poor Dad kind of shifts your focus and opens your eyes.
If you don't have that beaten into you at the beginning, I mean, everyone has different backgrounds. Everyone has different family environments and everything else. And especially if you grow up in an environment where your parents are W-2 and, all they've ever known is, go to work, punch in, punch out. It's hard for them to say, okay, well, maybe there's other options out there. Maybe I can go start that business. Maybe I could go, invest in real estate, where maybe I can go, I'll do all these things. But, if no one around you's ever done it, it's really hard. That's why reading books is so important, because now you get to dive into people's brains. You get to dive into those ideas that you would never have gotten otherwise, because the people around you in your sphere may or may not be, the people who are doing those types of things. So,
and let's face facts. The true reality of it is, no matter how much your friends and family love you and support you, they do. But if you really actually start to accomplish things that they may have been thinking about but never acted on, there's a certain side of them that doesn't want to see you succeed. So people are quick to tell you why you can't do something, why it won't work. And having those books and resources, and that's kind of why I do the YouTube thing, just trying to be a resource for somebody else to say, you know what, like I'm surrounded by people who've never done anything, and they're the ones telling me I can't do it. And, it took me a while to get to that point where when someone tells me something can't be done, I say it all the time. People around me get sick of it. I say, consider the source. Consider the source of who told you it can't be done. If they've never accomplished it, why would you think that they're the source that's going to explain why it can't be done? You can go do it. And having access to people and books written by people who've actually done it is so reinforcing.
Yeah, and what you'll find from people who are like really high performers, that's not in their vocabulary. The idea of something can't be done just isn't in their vocabulary. They think, well, how can we do it? That's the real question. That's the real question you should be asking yourself. Yes, there may be a lot of obstacles in your way, but how can you do it? Let's try this out. Okay, it didn't work. Let's try this out. That type of approach. And I feel like
I wish I could flip my computer around, because on the wall behind my computer over here, I have in frames. I printed them out. 2 sayings: discipline will never lead to failure. Excuses will never lead to success.
Yeah.
No truer words have ever been spoken. I 100% agree with that statement. That's awesome, man. So just to round out really the interview, what we usually do is we ask our guests to contribute something to the CRE treasure chest. Essentially what that is it's a repository on our website that has free resources that our listeners can use to learn more about the many facets of commercial real estate. So just wanted to ask, do you have something to contribute today?
So what I'm going to contribute is a spreadsheet that I use to analyze a multifamily property for investment. You can plug in what your projected closing costs are going to be, what your projected down payment and mortgage is going to be, what the capital appreciation rate year over year currently is in that area. I always put in conservative numbers. The area where I'm buying the property, like I put in a 4% capital appreciation rate. And, looking at the last 2 years, which are hard to judge anything by, it's been like 10 and 11% per year. But you punch in your conservative numbers and it'll give you an idea of how comfortable you can be with that investment. And, whether you're purchasing in the Midwest where you're really looking at cash flow, or purchasing like on the East or West Coast in a major metropolitan area where you're looking more at capital appreciation than cash flow. And it gives you an analysis of how much your mortgage is going to pay. When you plug in your mortgage, it'll show you how much is going to be paid down year over year based on the amortization rate, how much you can expect in return on capital appreciation for the value of your investment going up, and based on a rent increase that's reasonable for your area, what you can expect in increased cash flow as your property, you continue to own the property and maybe do some capital improvements.
Oh, that's great. We appreciate that. I mean, that's going to be a huge help to someone who's even just starting out or they're on their second, third, fourth deal. I mean,
it's a quick way to plug in some numbers and get a general sense. Like anything, you got to have some practice with it and play with it, because you'll punch in the numbers the first time and be like, oh my God, how does anyone make money in real estate? But the
numbers have to work for sure.
Yeah, the perfect example of the deal I'm doing. When I first punched in the numbers, I was like, it doesn't look like it works, but I've done enough of this that I know it's going to work. And now that we're at the closing and I know what the realistic numbers are and what I could really get in rents for the units, I'm like, oh yeah, no, it's a great deal. I'm very happy that we're buying. So
that's good. So if someone's wanting to get a hold of you to know a little more about investing in New York City or if they actually want to do a deal with you, what's a great way for them to contact you? And
I have Instagram, Confident Real Estate on Instagram. Obviously, my Confident Real Estate YouTube page, you can click the contact link there, and that will direct you to a Gmail that I have, confidentrealestateofficial@gmail.com, and access any of those. You can reach out to me. And if you're looking to do a deal in New York, then we'll really take it offline and we'll go through what your deal analysis is and what you're going to do and what your options are. Obviously, I love helping people. So I'm going to tell somebody who wants to do a deal how much I can really help them, and no BS. If I can't help you, I'll direct you to somebody that I think can.
That's awesome. Yeah. We'll include all those links in the description below, whether you're listening to this on a podcast or whether you're listening to this on YouTube, they'll be in the description. So again,
Absolutely.
JC, thank you so much for stopping by. Again, if you guys are listening to this on a podcast, please throw a 5-star review for us. It really helps with making sure that more and more people can hear this message. Not only that, if you're listening on YouTube, feel free to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps, again, with making sure that more and more people can hear this podcast. So again, thanks so much, JC, and we'll see you all next time.